Part 1, The Glow at Dusk. It was supposed to be a quick hike, just enough to catch the sunset from the ridge. I'd been on that trail before, but never this late in the day. By the time I reached the halfway point, the light had already shifted. The golds and reds of evening slid into deep blues, and the shadows between the trees stretched longer than they should have. That's when I saw it. Through a thin line of pines ahead, there was a faint glow. Not the white flash of a flashlight, not the steady beam of a headlamp. This was warmer, orange, almost golden. It pulsed softly, like the flame of a lantern swaying in someone's hand. I slowed down, my boots crunching over the damp leaves. There was no reason for anyone to be out here this late, at least not on this part of the trail. The campsites were miles away. As I got closer, the glow dipped behind a cluster of trees, then reappeared, closer this time. I told myself it could be another hiker making their way out. Maybe they'd gotten caught after dark. But something was off. The light didn't bob with the rhythm of walking. It moved too smoothly, sliding between the trees without a sound. I called out, just a quick, hey, but the glow didn't change. No voice answered. A breeze stirred the pine needles, carrying the faint smell of smoke. Not fresh campfire smoke, older, colder, like the smell of an extinguished flame still clinging to the air. The trail curved toward the light, but before I rounded the bend, it stopped moving. It just hung there between the trees, steady now. Waiting. Part 2. The footsteps in the clearing. I hesitated at the bend, telling myself I'd just passed by without looking. But the glow was right in my line of sight. Impossible to ignore. The trail opened into a small clearing I didn't remember from before. An uneven patch of ground surrounded by pines that seemed taller than the rest. The glow hovered near the center, low to the ground, casting long, sharp shadows across the grass. There was no lantern, no visible source at all. Just the light itself, hanging in the air. I took a step forward. Leaves crunched under my boot, the sound too loud in the stillness. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. They were faint, almost delicate, coming from somewhere beyond the glow. Each one landed on dry leaves, slow and deliberate, like someone trying to stay quiet but not quite managing it. I froze. My ears strained to catch every sound, my breathing shallow. The steps circled, not toward me but around the edge of the clearing. I couldn't see anyone, just the steady glow and the darkness beyond. A twig snapped to my left. I turned quickly, but nothing moved. The pines stood still, their branches heavy with shadows. When I looked back at the glow, it had shifted. It was closer now, just a few yards away, bright enough to make my eyes adjust. The footsteps stopped. I didn't move. I just stood there, the smell of that cold smoke curling in the air, waiting for something to step into the light. But nothing did. The glow stayed where it was, and the forest waited with it. Part 1. The sound beneath the water. The river trail was my escape. I'd walk it after work, just far enough that the sound of traffic faded and all I could hear was the water moving over the rocks. That evening, the light was fading fast. The river caught the last traces of sunset, the surface breaking into shards of orange and silver. I stayed longer than I should have, knowing the path back would be darker. As I walked, the sound of the water seemed different. It wasn't just the usual rush and splash. There was something under it, softer, almost in rhythm with my steps. I slowed, tilting my head toward the current. The softer sound grew clearer. Not a bird, not an animal. More like a voice. It was low, steady, almost like someone murmuring from underwater. I couldn't make out words, just the shape of them, the way syllables bent and faded with the current. I stepped closer to the bank. The air was cooler here, damp against my face. The voice seemed to rise and fall with the flow, and for a moment I thought I heard my name. A ripple broke the surface upstream, though nothing had fallen in. Then another, closer. The voice stopped. The river's normal sound filled the silence again, but the hair on my neck stayed standing. I backed away from the edge, my eyes scanning the darkening path ahead. The forest was quiet. Too quiet. That's when I realized the trail behind me was darker than it should have been, as if the shadows had crept closer while I was listening. Part 2. The branch that snapped. I told myself to keep walking, to not look back, but the feeling in my gut wouldn't settle. The air had that tight stillness, the kind that presses in around you until every sound feels amplified. The trail narrowed, forcing me closer to the water. I kept my eyes ahead, scanning for the turn that would lead me back toward the parking lot. That's when I heard it. A single, sharp snap from somewhere in the trees to my right. It wasn't the kind of snap you get from falling twigs or shifting branches. It was loud, close, like a heavy foot pressing down where it shouldn't. I froze, one hand tightening around the strap of my bag. The trees in that direction were thick, the kind of dark where shapes blur together. I couldn't see anything, but I could feel it. Something standing there, just inside the tree line. A slow rustle followed, like leaves brushing against fabric. My skin prickled. I took one step forward, and the sound moved with me, matching my pace. I quickened to 3 steps. The sound followed, then stopped just as I did. The river to my left sounded louder now, rushing over rocks, but it didn't drown out the faint crunch of leaves in the darkness to my right. Whoever, or whatever, it was, they were keeping parallel with me. I caught a glint through the trees, just for a second, like moonlight on something smooth. Then it was gone. That's when the voice came back. Not from the river this time. From the trees. Low, steady. Closer. Part 3. The voice at my shoulder. I started walking faster, my eyes locked on the faint curve of the trail ahead. I didn't want to run. Running felt like it would break some unspoken rule, but my pulse was already hammering in my ears. The voice stayed just out of reach. It didn't call my name again, but it had the same tone as before. Low, deliberate, almost patient. The kind of voice you lean toward without realizing you've moved. The river bend forced me closer to the tree line. I could hear the water hitting rocks just a few feet away, but I didn't dare look at it. My focus was on the trail, on the soft crunch of gravel under my boots. Then the voice shifted. It wasn't behind the trees anymore. It was beside me. I didn't see anyone when I glanced to my right, only the dark mass of trunks and branches. But the sound was clear, right at ear level, as if someone was leaning close enough to whisper directly into the space between my breath and theirs. The words still didn't make sense, but the tone, it carried a smile I couldn't see. I broke then. My steps turned into a run, the gravel slipping under me. The voice didn't follow, not in sound, anyway, but I could feel it keeping pace. When I reached the lot, my car was the only one there. I yanked the door open, slammed it shut, and locked it twice. As I started the engine, I made the mistake of glancing at the passenger window. A reflection looked back, my face in the glass, and just behind it, the faint outline of another. Part 1. The shape beside the tent. We'd picked the site for its seclusion, a small clearing half a mile off the main trail, tucked between 2 ridges. By late afternoon, the rest of the campers were just distant voices fading into the trees. The first night was uneventful. A small fire, quiet conversation, and the steady hum of crickets under the stars. But the second night, the woods felt different. The air was heavy, carrying no wind, and even the insects seemed muted. I turned in early, lying in my sleeping bag with the tent flap zipped half open for the breeze. Moonlight filtered through the trees, pale and thin. That's when I noticed it, something blocking part of that light. At first I thought it was a tree, but the shape was wrong. Too narrow, too close. It stood just beyond the flap, perfectly still, as if it had been there long before I noticed. I didn't move, barely breathe. My eyes adjusted enough to see its edges. A dark outline against the lighter ground. No shift of weight, no sway from a breeze that wasn't there. Minutes passed, though it felt longer. Eventually I blinked, and when my vision cleared, the shape was gone. I told myself it had been my imagination, just a shadow cast by the uneven ground. But later, as I drifted towards sleep, I heard the faint crunch of leaves, not moving away. Circling. Part 2. The breath outside the flap. The sound moved slow, deliberate, dry leaves pressing and releasing under weight. My breathing was shallow now, my ears straining against the silence between each step. Then it stopped, right outside my tent. I kept my eyes on the thin strip of moonlight along the zipper. The air felt thicker, like the space outside was holding something in it. And then I heard it. Breathing. Not fast, not winded, just steady, measured inhales and exhales. The kind you make when you're standing still. I gripped the flashlight in my bag but didn't turn it on. Part of me thought that if I shined the beam, whatever was there would lean in closer just to see. The breathing went on for what felt like minutes. Then something brushed the fabric, so light it could have been a fingertip. My pulse jumped so hard I felt it in my jaw. The sound shifted to my left, circling the tent in slow, deliberate arcs. I turned with it, my sleeping bag whispering against the nylon. And then, without warning, it stopped again, this time by my head. The only thing between us was that thin layer of fabric. The breathing deepened for 1, 2, 3 cycles. Then it was gone. No retreating footsteps, no rustle of leaves, just absence. I lay awake until the first grey light pushed through the trees, afraid that if I unzipped the flap too soon, I'd see someone still standing there. Part 3. The last morning. When I finally unzipped the tent at dawn, the clearing was quiet. The air was cool, damp with the smell of wet earth. Nothing seemed out of place, no tracks, no disturbed brush, nothing to prove anything had been there at all. My friend was still asleep in their tent a few yards away. I almost woke them to ask if they'd heard anything, but something in me didn't want to. Saying it out loud would make it too real. We moved slowly that morning, packing up in the soft, pale light. I kept glancing toward the tree line, scanning for movement, but the forest looked empty. It wasn't until I took down my tent that I saw it. On the side that had faced the moonlight, just below where my head had been, the nylon was marked with a faint smear. It wasn't dirt, not exactly. It was darker, almost greasy, like something had leaned close enough to press against the fabric. I ran my fingers over it. The spot was cool, even though the morning sun was starting to warm the rest of the material. I didn't mention it when we hiked out. My friend talked about breakfast, about how peaceful the woods were this time of year. I just kept moving, every step bringing a little more distance between me and the clearing. But as we reached the main trail, I looked back one last time. Between the trees, half in shadow, something stood where my tent had been. It didn't follow, it didn't move at all, it just watched. The forest has a way of holding on to you. It's not just the memories, the sharp moments that make your chest tighten when you think about them. It's the way those moments seem to echo whenever you're near the trees again. A breeze shifts, a branch cracks somewhere in the distance, and suddenly you're back there, staring into shadows that feel heavier than they should. Maybe you've been lucky. Maybe your hikes have been nothing but sunlight and friendly trails. But for the ones who felt it, that unseen weight in the air, that sense of being measured by something you can't name, you know how quickly peace can turn to unease. It's not always about seeing something. Sometimes it's about what doesn't move, what doesn't speak, what doesn't step into the light. But you still know it's there. So the next time you step off the path, or linger a little too long by the water, or zip your tent against the dark, listen. Really listen. And if you feel that pull at the back of your neck, the one that tells you to turn around, ask yourself if you really want to see what's waiting.